How to sew the book cover. The book cover comes in a choice of prints for all your book cover needs. Cover your notebook in style. The padded cover will fit an A5 notebook and includes pockets too. Cutting out. Take the panel and unfold it so it's lying flat and press it if there are any creases. You can see that all the pieces on the panel are labelled with a label above each piece. Cut out all the pieces and pin the label to the top edge of the relevant piece. There are extra things like the book cover label that you can use to applique on if you like, and all the spaces are filled as well. All the seam allowances are included on all the pieces of the fabric. Making the slip pocket. Take the slip pocket outer and the slip pocket lining and place them together right sides facing. Then pin them together along the top edge only, making sure that the raw edges match up. Now sew them together across the top. Once that's done, open out the two pieces and press the seam open and flat. Now refold them so they are wrong sides facing and making sure that seam lies right on the top edge, then top stitch along there through both layers. Once that's done, take the book cover back and place the slip pocket on top. Now you'll notice that whichever book cover you're making, the prints will match up. So make sure that you match up the prints and then put a pin to hold the pocket to the book cover back. Put one on the side, one in the centre just to hold it in place, and then put one on the other side, and then the pocket will match the book cover back beautifully. Now place some more pins down the side and across the bottom. Now tack together down the side, across the bottom and up the other side. Once that's done, your book cover back with slip pocket outer is finished. Put this to one side for now. Making the pencil pocket. Take the pencil pocket outer and the pencil pocket lining and place them right sides facing, making sure all the raw edges match up. Now pin them together all the way around. Pin together down one side, then turn it round and pin together up the other side and across the top. Now you need to leave a turning gap in the centre of the bottom edge, so fold it in half, make a little crease to find the centre, and then mark with pins or a pen to leave a 1.5 inch gap in the centre. Now stitch it together all the way around, starting at one side of the turning gap all the way around and finishing at the other side of the turning gap. Once this is done, press the seams open by pressing the top side, the top piece over to one side. This will help you to get neat seams to lie on the edge when you turn it right sides out later. To remove bulk from the corners, just clip off the corners so that when you turn it right sides out, you don't have as much fabric in this place. Now put your fingers inside the turning gap and take hold of one of the bottom corners and push that up through the gap to help you to turn the pencil pocket out, right sides out, a little bit easier. Once this is turned right sides out, you can remove the labels because you won't need them now. Push out all the corners. Use your fingers to start with and then use something pointed to push them out neatly, making sure you don't go through the seams as well. Once this is done, top stitch across the top edge only. Once you've top stitched it, take one of the book cover flaps and measure and mark 3/4 inch up from the bottom raw edge. Now place the pencil pocket right sides up on top of the right side of that, making sure it's 3/4 inch up from the bottom edge and centrally across, which will be about 3/4 inch as well. Now pin the pencil pocket into place, down the sides and across the bottom. And top stitch down the side across the bottom and up the other side. You can also stitch dividing lines to divide it into individual pockets too if you want to. Once this is done, you've now got 3 little pockets. You could put pencils in here, or crochet hooks, or other small tools. Put this to one side for now. If you want to label your book cover, this is a good place to put it. Write your name or embroider it, and then stitch it to the top. I used a blanket stitch for this. Put it to one side for now. Making the flap pocket. Take the flap pocket outer and the flap pocket lining and place them right sides facing. Make sure all the raw edges match up, both the straight edges and the curved edges as well. Now pin them together all the way around the edge. You need to leave a turning gap so that we can turn this right sides out in a moment. So mark and measure a 1.5 inch turning gap just on one of the straight sides in about this position, a little bit, maybe 1/3 of the way down from the top curved edge, but it doesn't have to be exactly that. Now stitch together all the way around, starting and finishing at either end of the turning gap. Once this is done, clip the corners to remove the bulk from here so you get neater corners when you turn it right sides out. Now with the curved edge, if you trim the seam allowance in half, so it's about 1/8 of an inch wide, all the way around just the curved edge, this will help the curved edge to lay flat when you turn it right sides out. And you won't need to clip it if you just trim it in half by about 1/8 of an inch, or you could use pinking shears here if you prefer. Now fold over the top fabric so that you can press the seam open. If you fold this all the way round and press, you'll get neater edges when you turn the pocket right sides out later. Fold them first with your fingers and then you can press. Where the turning gap is, it's better if you also turn the fabric over on the other side. It just helps that turning gap to stay under when you turn it right sides out later. Now turn the pocket right sides out through that gap. If you put your fingers through the gap and then push the curved edge through, it will turn out a little bit easier. Once this is done, and it's all nice and neat and pressed all the way around, top stitch along just the top short straight edge. Now you need to fold your pocket. So you need to fold it up by 7 inches. So if you measure 14 inches from the right hand short straight edge and mark that with a pin, that's double the 7. If you fold the end up to mark that pin, you will have folded it up by 7 inches. The lining is now facing and the outers are on the outside. Fold the flap over and just press it. Now you need to attach a snap or a press fastener to the top of the flap and where it meets on the outer to hold it closed. You'll need to remove any side pins to do this. Once that's done, take the other book cover flap and position the bottom edge of the pocket 1 inch up from the bottom of the flap. Mark and measure and mark this with a pin. You also need to make sure that this flap pocket is centrally across, so just measure to make sure. Once that's done, pin the pocket into place across the bottom and along the sides, making sure it stays central. Now open up the flap so it's lying flat and facing upwards. Once that's done, top stitch down the side, across the bottom and up the other side. Your flap pocket is now finished. You can keep items inside and use the fastener to close it. There's also an extra pocket behind you can keep scissors in. Making the handles. The handles are optional, so you can leave these out if you prefer. If you want to make handles, take one handle piece and fold it in half lengthways with right sides facing. Now pin it together down the long edges, making sure all those raw edges are matching. Now sew together down this long edge. You can also tack it together across the short edge to help turning it right sides out. Now press the seam open and flat. You now need to turn it right sides out. The easiest way to do this is with a turning tube. Place the tube inside the handle and then take the stick that comes with the tube and using the blunt end, push the handle all the way through to turn it right sides out. Remove the tacking stitches at the end to create a tube, then press the handle so that the seam lies right on the edge and top stitch down both sides. Now one handle is finished, take the other handle piece and repeat this to make the other handle in the same way. Making the book cover outer. Take the book cover front and if you want to attach the label to it, do so at this point, but this is optional. Now take the book cover back with the pocket attached and place them right sides facing with the front underneath. Now pin them together down the left long side only. You'll be pinning through the book cover front and back and also the pocket that's attached. Now stitch these together all the way along. Once that's done, press the seam allowance open and flat and place the joined front and back together. Now if you want to attach handles, do so at this stage, but if you don't want to, just skip on to the next step. If you want to add handles, measure 2.5 inches down from the top edge of the book cover front and mark with a pin. Now take one of the handles and place it right sides down on top, making sure that it extends beyond the edge of the book cover by 1/4 inch. This will just make it extra secure. Pin that short edge of the handle into place. Now pin it into place about 1.5 inches along. This will just help to keep it straight during assembly. Now take your tape measure and mark 2.5 inches up from the bottom edge and mark this place with a pin. Take the other end of the handle, making sure it stays straight, and place the outer edge of it on this pin, again making sure it extends beyond the edge of the book cover by 1/4 inch. Pin the short end of this handle into place, then pin it into place a little bit further along, making sure it stays straight. Now tack the handle into place at the top and a little bit further down too. Pin and tack the other handle to the book cover back in exactly the same way in the same positions. Now take the book cover flap with the pencil pocket attached and place it right sides together with the book cover front. Pin it into place, making sure the raw edges match all the way along. You will notice that the ends of the handles stick out beyond the edge of the flap. Now stitch it together. Take the book cover flap with the flap pocket attached and place that right sides facing on the book cover back, matching raw edges. Pin the flap to the book cover back in the same way. Again, you'll see the ends of the handles are sticking out beyond the edge of the flap. Sew this together. Assembling the book cover. Take the wadding and place that down flat on flat surface. Take the book cover lining and place that right sides up centrally on top of the wadding. Make sure it's lying flat. Now take the book cover outer that you've made with all the flaps and pockets attached and place that right sides down on top of the lining. Now pin the outer and the lining together through the wadding as well, making sure they stay lying flat, the raw edges are matching and are central on the wadding. Now you need to leave a turning gap in the centre of one of the sides. I like to leave mine in the side with the flap pocket attached because that's on the back of the bag. Leave a 4-inch turning gap, so mark and measure this with pins. Now pin it together all 3 layers all the way around the sides, making sure that the raw edges match up as you do. Then stitch it together, starting at one end of the turning gap and finishing at the other end of the turning gap. Once this is done and you've stitched it together all the way round, you now need to trim the wadding. The wadding needs to be trimmed so that it is level with the raw edges of the fabric. Trim the wadding all the way round. Once this is done, clip the corners to reduce bulk in these areas. You can now turn the book cover right sides out. But before you do that, to get neater edges, to make sure the seams lie right on the edges, it's better if you press the seams open. So take the top fabric and press the seam allowance over to one side. It's the easiest way because it's harder to press seams open when you're dealing with this sort of shape. So press the seams open all the way round, and then when you get to the turning gap edge, turn that over and press the seam allowance over to one side on the back as well to help it to stay underneath when you turn it right sides out. So once you've done that and everything is pressed, put your hand right inside the turning gap, all the way to one of the bottom corners, and take hold of that with your fingers and pull that corner all the way through, as that's quite a quick and easy way to turn something right sides out. Now using your fingers, push out all the corners and make sure all the seams are lying right on the edge. Use something pointed but not too sharp to help push out the corners and make the seams lie on the edge to get a neater finish. Then press it so the seam lies right on the edge. Once it's done, it'll look nice and neat and flat. Now take the edges of the turning gap, making sure they're still folded inwards, and pin them together. You'll need to remove the tacking stitches that you put in to hold the handles in place to keep them straight if you've put handles in your book cover. So just remove those tacking stitches using a seam ripper. Remove them from the other handle as well. Now top stitch down that short side and top stitch down that short side. That'll give you a neater finish and hold the turning gap closed as well. Add stitching down the seam lines as well, as it will help the book cover to fold. You can add any other quilting details to it here if you want to. Now fold the flaps over to the lining side. That extra seam that you work through all three layers will help with this. Now making sure that the seam between the flap and the outer is right on the edge, pin or clip the flap to the outer. I use clips for this because you've got quite a few layers to get through and it's easier to hold for the clips to hold it in place. Again, making sure that seam lies right on the very edge, pin or clip the other end of the flap to the outer. Make sure that the seam lines that are on the edges all line up. Fold the other flap over, again make sure that seam is lying right on the edge, and pin and clip the flap into place. Turn it round and pin or clip the top of the flap into place, again making sure that seam lies right on the edge. Once this is done, top stitch all the way along the top edge and all the way along the bottom edge to hold the flaps in place. Do this nice and slowly. Your book cover is now finished. So take an A5 hardback cover book and put the one cover in one flap, bend it slightly and put the other book cover in the other flap. And your book cover is now finished with handles. In the pencil pocket at the front, you can put pencils if you sew dividing lines or pens. or you can even put crochet hooks in. On the back pocket, you can put smaller items behind in that pocket, maybe a pair of scissors, or you can put scissors inside the pocket and close the press fastener to finish. Put notes in the back flap. Your book cover is now finished and ready to use.